My son looked me dead in the eye and said it like it was nothing. "Dad, the best gift you can give us this weekend is to just not be here." His wife Nadine was standing right behind him, arms crossed, and she didn't flinch. She just nodded once, slow, like she'd been waiting a long time to hear those words come out of his mouth. What happened next is something I never expected. Before that weekend was over, I had canceled their $18,000 wedding reception, filed paperwork to force a sale on the house I co-owned, and checked into a hotel room where I slept better than I had in 6 months. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Gerald Harmon. I'm 63 years old, widower. I built a small electrical contracting business from nothing over 28 years, then sold it when Eleanor got sick. She passed 5 years ago. I say all that not to set myself up as some kind of hero, but because you need to understand what I put into this family before you can understand what it felt like to stand in that kitchen and hear my own son tell me to disappear. Here's the thing about being a provider. You do it for so long that it becomes invisible. The money shows up, the problems get solved, and after a while, nobody thinks about where it comes from. It just appears. Like weather. 3 years before that night, I'd sold the house Eleanor and I had lived in for 22 years. Victorian place, 2 stories. We'd fixed it up room by room together. I took $87,000 from that sale and handed it to Craig and Nadine for a down payment on their home. I also signed on as co-borrower so they could qualify for the mortgage. They were good about it at first. Grateful even, they said I'd always have a place there. Always be part of the family. I believed them. For the 6 months before the wedding, I was living in the guest room, not my room. Always the guest room, because Nadine made a point of that distinction early on. Guests eventually leave. I told myself it was just her way of talking. I paid for groceries without being asked, fixed a leaking pipe under the bathroom sink, replaced the water heater when it gave out in February. And when Nadine decided she wanted to gut the kitchen, I wrote a $12,000 check without hesitating. She picked the countertops. Craig picked the cabinets. I signed the check and said it looked great. One afternoon, about a month before the wedding, I came in through the garage door after picking up some hardware. Nadine was in the kitchen on her phone, back to me, not expecting anyone home yet. "I don't know why he's still here," she said, laughing a little. "He's basically paying rent to live in his own son's house." I stood in the hallway and listened to her laugh at that for another few seconds. Then I set the hardware bag down quietly and walked back outside, sat on the porch steps, watched a neighbor mow his lawn across the street. Stayed there for about 20 minutes. I told myself it was just venting, that you can't hold people to everything they say in a private conversation. I'd spent 3 years telling myself things like that about a lot of moments that deserved more than excuses, but something had shifted. I felt it and I knew it. I just wasn't ready to act on it yet. Then came the night before the wedding. I was in the guest room getting dressed. Craig appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, and the look on his face was the look of a man who had rehearsed what he was about to say. "Dad, Nadine, and I talked. We think it would be better for everyone if you weren't here this weekend." I looked at him. He held eye contact, which surprised me. There was no guilt in it, just the flat certainty of someone who had already made up his mind and was past the part where he second-guessed himself. "The best gift you can give us," he said, "is to just not be here." I set down my tie, looked at my son, 38 years old, same jaw as his mother, and I said, very quietly, "You're right, I'll go." He blinked. That wasn't what he expected. I started folding clothes into my bag. Craig stood in the doorway for another moment, then left without another word. I could hear him downstairs telling Nadine it was handled. Before I zipped up the bag, I stopped at the nightstand. Eleanor's photo, the one from our trip to Lake Tahoe the summer before she got sick. She's squinting into the afternoon sun and laughing at something I'd said, and I can't remember what it was anymore, but I remember she was happy that day. I also found tucked under the edge of the frame a folded piece of paper I'd put there when I moved in. An old receipt from a hardware store in our old neighborhood, the kind of thing you keep for no reason. Her handwriting was on the back, just a grocery list. Milk, bread, coffee, the good kind. I put it in my shirt pocket. "I'm not going down without a fight," I told her. Then I picked up my bag, walked downstairs past the granite countertops I'd paid for, out through the front door, and got in my truck. I sat in my truck in the driveway for a few minutes. The lights were on inside. I could see Craig moving around in the kitchen through the window. He looked relaxed. I pulled out my phone and called Harriet Bowman. Harriet had been handling my legal affairs since Eleanor passed. Estate documents, the business sale, a property dispute with a neighbor that never went anywhere. She was thorough, and she was straight with me, which is all I ever asked for. She picked up on the third ring. "Gerald, it's Saturday evening. Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I need you to pull the file on Craig and Nadine's house purchase. All of it." A short pause. "Has something happened?" I told her everything, The 6 months in the guest room, the $87,000, the kitchen renovation, what Nadine said on the phone. What Craig said tonight, I talked for about 10 minutes without stopping, and Harriet listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciated about her. When I finished, she said, Gerald, do you remember the additional documents I had you sign when you first made that down payment? About 2 months after the initial transfer, I thought about it vaguely. There was a second set of papers. I sent Nadine an acknowledgement form 3 times over the following year. She never returned it. She kept saying she'd get to it. You were focused on keeping the peace and never pushed the issue. Another pause, because those forms were never signed. The original loan structure stayed in place. Legally, that $87,000 was never a gift, and because the acknowledgement was never filed, your name remained on the deed. I watched a car drive slowly past on the street. How much of the house do I own? 30%, and you're still listed as co-borrower on the mortgage. I sat with that for a moment. The house was worth somewhere around $350,000 now. 30% of that was over $100,000 in Harriet. I also signed the contract for their wedding reception. My name, my card on file. How much? $18,000. And the event is tomorrow? It is. As the contract holder, you have the right to cancel. You'll owe cancellation fees, but the decision is yours to make. I looked at the kitchen window one more time. Craig had opened a bottle of something and was pouring 2 glasses. I want to cancel the reception, I said. Tonight, Gerald, once you start this, there's no quiet way back. I know. All right, I'll pull the file first thing Monday. Call the venue tonight. I found the venue number in my email. A woman named Jessica answered, clearly not expecting a call at that hour. I told her I was canceling the reception. She pushed back, said the food had been prepared, the staff scheduled. I told her I understood and I was prepared to cover the cancellation fees, but that the contract was in my name and I was exercising my right to cancel. She put me on hold, came back 4 minutes later, and confirmed it was done. I drove to the Hampton Inn on the other side of town, checked in with 1 bag and ordered a burger and fries from room service, turned the TV on low, sat in the quiet. Here's what I noticed. I didn't feel guilty. I kept waiting for it, that familiar pull in the chest that usually followed any moment where I'd done something that might upset Craig or Nadine. It wasn't there. What I felt instead was something closer to clarity, like a window had been opened in a room that had been shut for a long time. I turned off the ringer and went to sleep. The calls started at 11 to 22 p.m. I know because I checked the phone once, saw the screen lighting up, and turned it face down. At 11 to 47, I picked up. Craig's voice was tight and fast. Dad, what did you do? The venue called. They said the reception is canceled. That's right, I said. There are 200 people coming tomorrow. I know that's going to be a problem to solve. Are you serious right now? This is insane. You're doing all this because you're upset about a room? I kept my voice even. I'm not upset about a room, Craig. I canceled a reception I was paying for after the person I was paying for told me to disappear from the family. Those 2 things are connected. Nadine grabbed the phone. She was crying, the loud kind. You're destroying everything. We trusted you. How could you do this on the night before our wedding? You trusted me, I said. When was the last time either of you called just to ask how I was doing? Not because you needed something, just to check. Silence. The reception cost $18,000. The photographer, the band, the dinner for 200 people. Did you think that was free? Did you think the $87,000 for the house, the $12,000 for the kitchen, the grocery runs, the car repairs, all of it, did you think that just appeared because you needed it too? Craig came back on. His voice had dropped. What do you want, Dad? Right now, a good night's sleep, I said. We can talk about the rest later. I hung up, turned the ringer off again. Finished my burger. The TV was showing an old Western I half recognized, and I watched it until I fell asleep in the chair. By Sunday morning, I had 41 missed calls. I ignored all of them and ordered coffee and eggs from room service. Read the paper, watch the weather forecast for a city I'd never been to. It was the most peaceful morning I'd had in months. At 9 a.m. there was a knock at the door. Craig was standing in the hallway in a wrinkled dress shirt, the one he'd probably laid out the night before for the wedding. His eyes were red. He looked like he hadn't slept. I opened the door but didn't step back. Dad, please. We need to talk. Shouldn't you be getting ready? That's what I need to talk about. He ran a hand through his hair. Nadine's locked herself in the bathroom. Her mother is threatening to fly back to California. The whole thing is falling apart. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because it doesn't seem like it. I stepped back and let him in. Sat down in the chair by the window. He stood for a moment, then sat on the edge of the bed. I let him talk first. He said it was all a misunderstanding, that Nadine was stressed, that I was blowing one bad night into something it wasn't. He said it twice, 3 times, in different ways, the way people do when they're hoping one version of it will finally land. I waited until he was done. Craig, How much money have I given you and Nadine in the last 3 years? He shifted. I don't know. Some help here and there. I picked up my phone and turned the screen toward him. I'd been keeping records, bank transfers, check images, receipts. A running total I'd started putting together after the kitchen renovation. Not out of resentment, just because I wanted to understand what I was looking at. 12 fee 4,000, I said, 87,000 for the house, $12,000 for the kitchen, the rest in what you two called emergencies. Car repairs, utility bills. The month Nadine's credit card was past due, and she asked me not to mention it to you. He stared at the phone. The color went out of his face. We were going to pay you back, were you? Because Nadine has been looking at new cars. You two have a Europe trip saved on your laptop. Neither of you has brought up repayment once. He put his head in his hands. That's not fair. Your combined income is around $8,000 a month. Your mortgage is $2,400. Add the car payments, the credit cards, Nadine's spending, and you're going backwards every single month. I know because I've been making up the difference. Did you think the money fairy was leaving it under your pillow? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. When was the last time you called just to talk? Not because something broke or you were short this month, just to see how I was doing. He opened his mouth, closed it. I'll wait. The silence stretched long enough to become its own kind of answer. Your mother never made me feel like a burden in my own home, I said. Not once in 35 years. I've been in that guest room for 6 months and I felt like a problem to be managed since the first week. He looked up. That's not how we meant it. Maybe not, but it's how it landed. I sat back. There's something else you need to know. I told him about the co-ownership, about Harriet, about the acknowledgement forms Nadine had never returned, and what that meant legally. I watched his expression move through confusion, then disbelief, then something harder. You can't own part of our house, we live there. With my $87,000 down payment. Yes, your lawyer would have explained this to you if you'd read the paperwork before signing, but you said it was help. You said you wanted to see us get started. And Harriet said she wanted to protect my investment. She sent the forms 3 times, Craig. 3 times over a full year. Nadine never returned them. I kept my voice level. I didn't plan any of this. If I'd been scheming, I would have pulled the plug before I spent $18,000 on your wedding. He was quiet for a long time. So what happens now? You have 2 options. You buy out my 30% at current market value, which is around $105,000, or we put the house on the market and split the proceeds by ownership percentage. We can't afford $105,000. Then you'll need to think seriously about the second option. He stood up, sat back down, stood up again. I need to call Nadine.
Go ahead.
He was at the door when I said his name. He stopped. When you talk to her, there's something I want you to understand. I'm not the same man who walked out of that house last night. That man spent 3 years trying to keep the peace at any cost. This man is done paying for his own disrespect. He left without another word. I heard the elevator open and close down the hall. I poured another cup of coffee from the room service carafe and sat by the window. Outside, a family was loading luggage into a minivan in the parking lot. Kids arguing about something. Father lifting the last bag into the back, closing the hatch, tapping the roof twice. I watched them pull out and thought about Eleanor. She would have handled this differently. She was better with people than I ever was. But she also had a line, and when you crossed it, she didn't yell. She just got very quiet and very clear. I'd always admired that about her. I think I finally understood what it felt like. Monday morning, Harriet and I walked into the police station together. Nadine had called Adult Protective Services on Sunday afternoon. The report claimed I was showing signs of cognitive decline, making irrational financial decisions, and that my family was concerned about my welfare. Detective Clifford had a file on his desk when we sat down. I put my file on his desk too. 2 years of bank statements organized by date, the co-ownership deed. The promissory note Harriet had drafted at the time of the down payment, a printed log of every transfer, every check, every online bill payment made on Craig and Nadine's behalf, $100,000 and $124,000 documented to the dollar. Harriet walked him through it in about 20 minutes. She didn't editorialize, just facts, dates, amounts. Detective Clifford looked up from the papers. Mr. Harmon, I want to ask you directly. Are you under any pressure from family members to make financial decisions you don't want to make? The pressure has been going the other direction, I said. For 3 years. He looked at the statements again, nodded slowly. I'm going to close this as unfounded. You clearly have full command of your finances and your situation. He paused. In fact, if anything, the documentation here suggests the concern might run the other way. That's what I'm saying. I told him. Outside in the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Harmon, my name is Philip Strand. I'm Nadine's brother. I heard what happened this weekend. I'd like to talk if you're open to it. I've seen this before. I showed it to Harriet. She shrugged. Can't hurt to listen. Philip met me at a diner 2 miles from the station. He was 42, worked as a Finnish carpenter, had a firm handshake and the look of a man who didn't waste words. He ordered black coffee and got right to it. Nadine did something similar in her last relationship, he said. Guy she dated for 2 years before Craig, he owned a condo. She moved in, took over the finances, started cutting him off from his friends. When he finally pushed back, she reported him to his landlord association for imaginary violations. He wrapped both hands around his mug. I told her then that she had a problem. She didn't speak to me for 14 months. Why are you telling me this now? Because I reached out to Craig last week before all this happened. Told him I was worried about the pattern I was seeing. He didn't want to hear it. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. But he did send me this yesterday. It was a screenshot of a text exchange between Craig and Nadine from 3 days before the wedding. In it, Nadine had written, "Just agree with me on the room situation. He won't fight back, he never does." I read it twice. Craig sent you this yesterday afternoon. I think seeing everything fall apart made something click. Philip put the phone back in his pocket. I don't know what you're planning to do about the house, but if it ever goes to any kind of legal proceeding, I'll say what I know. I thanked him and drove back to the hotel. That evening Nadine called. She was calmer than the night before, which somehow made it worse. The crying had a kind of logic to it. This was calculated. Gerald, I want to apologize. I was completely out of line. I was stressed about the wedding and I took it out on you, and that wasn't fair. I appreciate you saying that. I want to fix this. Tell me what I can do. You can start by understanding that an apology at the moment of consequence isn't the same as actually changing. Those are different things. A pause. What does that mean? It means the apology is a start. But what comes next matters more than what you're saying right now. We'll pay you back everything, all of it. With what, Nadine? You don't work. Craig's income doesn't cover your expenses. You've been running a deficit for 3 years, and the only reason it hasn't collapsed is because I've been filling the gap. Silence. Here's what I'm offering, I said. Harriet's office, Thursday at 2, bring Craig. Bring a realistic picture of your finances, and come ready to make a decision about the house, not to negotiate your way out of one, she agreed. I hung up and sat for a while. I thought about what Philip had said. He won't fight back. He never does. She wasn't wrong up until that Saturday night. I had spent 3 years absorbing things that deserved a response. A quiet comment here, a dismissal there. Being talked around instead of talked to. Being thanked with obligation instead of genuine feeling. I had told myself it was keeping the peace. The truth was, I just didn't want to see what it would mean if I looked at it directly. There's a version of patience that's actually just avoidance. I had been living inside that version for a long time. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the folded grocery list. Milk, bread, coffee, the good kind. Eleanor had written that on a Tuesday morning before running errands. Ordinary day. I remember she kissed me on the cheek on her way out and said she'd be back before lunch. She always came back before lunch. I put the paper back in my pocket and got ready for Thursday. Harriet's office felt like neutral ground. Dark wood, leather chairs, a window that looked out onto a parking garage, nothing warm about it, which was exactly right for what we were doing. Craig and Nadine arrived 12 minutes late. I'd been there since 1:45 Lorraine Strand. Nadine's mother had flown back from California and asked to be present. I said that was fine. She sat in the corner chair and didn't say much, which turned out to be its own kind of statement. Nadine had put herself back together on the outside. Hair done, good clothes, but her eyes were tired in a way that makeup doesn't cover. Craig sat next to her with his hands flat on the table like a man waiting for a verdict. Harriet laid out the documents, deed, co-borrower agreement, the original loan structure, the acknowledgement form sent 3 times, never returned. She walked through it the same way she'd walked Detective Clifford through it, clean and without editorializing. Craig studied the papers. We had no idea about the ownership stake. You would have, Harriet said, if the acknowledgement had been returned. I sent it in March, again in July, again the following February. Nadine said she'd been busy with wedding planning. Harriet looked at her for a moment and didn't respond to that. I let them sit with the documents for a minute before I spoke. Here's what I'm offering. One time they both looked up. Market value of my 30% is $105,000. I'm offering a buyout at $75,000. That's $30,000 less than what I'm legally owed, because Craig is still my son and I'm not trying to take everything. But there are conditions. I laid them out one at a time. Nadine gets a job within 60 days and keeps it for at least 18 months. They sell one of the 2 cars and use the proceeds to pay down credit card debt. Monthly financial check-ins with Harriet, bank statements and credit report included. No new debt taken on during the 18-month period, and Craig writes me a letter by hand, not a text and not an email, that says what he actually wants to say. Nadine shook her head slowly. That's like being put on probation. That's called accountability, I said. There's a difference. We don't have $75,000. You have equity in the house and you have 30 days to arrange financing. A home equity loan, a personal loan, help from family. That's your problem to solve, not mine. Craig looked at his mother-in-law. Lorraine had been quiet the whole time. She looked back at him, then at her daughter. I'm not giving you the money, she said. I told Nadine the same thing this morning. She needs to stand up on her own. Nadine turned to her. Something passed between them that I didn't fully understand. The compressed history of a mother and daughter who had been through this kind of moment before. Craig turned back to me. What if we can't get the financing together? Then we list the house. You walk away with your share of the proceeds and find something that fits your actual income. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Craig said, we'll take the deal. Nadine didn't say anything. She picked up the pen Harriet slid toward her and signed where she was told to sign. I watched her do it. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel much of anything except tired in the way you feel at the end of a long job that needed doing. 6 months later, I was sitting on the small patio outside my apartment with a cup of coffee and the morning paper. 2-bedroom place in a senior community with a walking trail and a library that smelled the way libraries are supposed to smell. I had a tomato plant in a pot by the railing that was doing better than I expected. My phone rang. Craig, Dad, Nadine got promoted. Office manager. I set down my coffee. That's good. How is she? Tired a lot, but different. Like she's actually proud of something for the first time. A pause. I found Mom's ring when we were going through the storage boxes, the one she wore every day. I think you should have it back. I didn't say anything for a moment. Dad? Yeah, I'd like that. Nadine called me herself the following week. No setup, no preamble. I treated you badly for a long time and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't undo it. I just wanted to say it without an agenda. I told her I appreciated that. I meant it. On Tuesday evenings, I teach a free electrical basics class at the community center. 6 young guys who want to learn a trade. It's 2 hours and it's the best part of my week. Last Saturday after book club, I walked to my car with Norman Briggs, retired history teacher, 3 years in the community before me, and we stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes laughing because neither of us could remember the name of the book we'd just spent an hour discussing. Eleanor would have found that very funny. I think about what it cost me to get here. The money, the years, the long patience that turned out to be something closer to avoidance. And then I think about that hotel room on Saturday night. The quiet, the burger, the old Western on TV, the first real sleep I'd had in months. If you've been carrying someone who stopped trying to walk on their own, you already know what I'm talking about. At some point, holding on stops being love and starts being something else. Letting go was the hardest thing I did. It was also the most useful. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, and if someone in your life needs to hear this, share it. Sometimes the right story finds the right person at exactly the right time.